this top nub here that's sticking out. So I've got a few to work through, to work with. Showcase a few things. There's a really nice trunk on this one. Good root flare. Nice movement, no matter where you choose the front. What I'm contemplating is, do we and where do we prune this back? Do we go for a taller design? Let me stand that up just a little bit. Something a bit taller. Or do we pull that down? The interesting aspect is this, the taper, that's from thick, it's traveling up, thinning out. Here's a point where it gets thinner. But then this branch here, between these two, thinning down, good taper. And then this branch over here, this guy, this is as thick as the trunk from here to here. And right here, when it turns this direction, this really thins out again. It's way too long initially. So we know we're going to cut this down, right, to condense that canopy. But do we make this the trunk, but we'll lose taper? Or, as I've already done, cut that back and take some of that length away, so it's going to be a branch at least, but maybe that becomes the apex. Or do we keep that as a big major branch despite its thickness and continue here as the trunk line? Part of that all depends on the front, right? So I'm looking for the widest base where the tree meets the soil, the number of movements and the directionality of the tree, and the trunk as we look at it. Those are the considerations in looking at this too. I'm thinking about taking this off. For sure. With that gone, this is almost just too long and straight. Do we take this off as well? Bring it back this way. I really like it starting to muscle up. Here, I can bring it closer. That's one of the unique things about Korean hornbeam, as you can see along the trunk, all the contours and the shadows. Hornbeams form kind of a muscling in their tissue. Comes with age generally. There may be external stressors, but they haven't really done a lot of research into why. So there's still a lot of discussion about why in particular that happens to hornbeams. But it can't be purely environmental, or else pretty much every tree would develop that. I know we're going to at least bring this down to here. There's my cutting plate. And you're already starting to see a change in the tree. I really like how this comes back the other way, but if this is the front, there's really only 1, 2, 3 changes of movement. That may be the best we get, but then we lose the side of the trees somewhat bare. So let's see if we can rotate that and get a little more interest. See, if we bring it this way a little bit, we've got a wide trunk there. I'm really liking the idea of bringing this way back. Feels much better. Still going to give us the directionality that we need, because this isn't going into a pot immediately. So these will be able to grow out and elongate. As we control the growth throughout the canopy, we'll allow that branch to come out farther. Here's another one. Come back to here because it curves up all funky on us at the end. If we come back to here, it comes up a little bit, then it flattens out again. And we've got buds back here. So we're going to get the bifurcation and development we need. And they backbud fairly readily. So it's not going to be much of an issue moving forward in the development of this tree. We will want to protect it from inclement weather, being as it is a little early to be doing some major cuts, but not too early, because our daylight length will start drawing out and we'll be able to heal those wounds up, no problem. I think as I've messed with the tree a little bit, I want to keep this taller branch as the trunk. So where exactly do we prune down to is the great question. Where do we go from here? And sometimes it just takes playing with the trees a little bit. Make a cut here or there. Take off things you definitely know you don't want on the tree before things start to reveal themselves to you. Feels like the apex runs, too much of the tree runs that direction, primarily because of this, but also all three of these branches here, here, here. These three are going that direction if this is the front. There's no base flare from here, but there are good contours in the bark and good movement. Do we change the directionality of it, right? Do we lift it up just a little bit? Change that angle. I don't like this as the front either. Maybe this here, if we pull this branch over a little bit, that gives good balance to the tree, but at the same time, we're dealing with that age-old issue of what we want to be the trunk being facing the opposite direction. So are we beholden to that trunk and we sacrifice a little bit on the transition of taper? But one thing that's easy to tell is if you find a good base with good movement, always check the 180, because you're going to have almost the same tree, but your branches are going to be set up differently. So let's see if this is a better tree. From this angle, somewhat hides this branch here. Let's pull it flat down again and set it up that direction, because we've got these roots holding fast, so it's okay if it's leaning that way. And then if we bring this down, that'll fill in very nicely. This is somewhat in the back, so we'll play with that a little bit. Let's rotate it a tad. And now it reveals itself a bit. We can adjust those branches to come down, come up and over. Now it's not facing backwards, right? It's coming out more on the side. And then we can wire this guy. And let's bring him out here and we'll see how that looks. That gets us this main branch, right? But it hides it a bit. No big deal. I like this better from the side. All right. Maybe we shorten this one a little bit more. Let's bring this over here. Go this direction with it. Now, since this branch here is gonna fill that position, this one can come over this direction. It's not too intrusive. Let's seal that up. And wire this one branch out. It's pretty much set. Not too thick a wire. These will scar up. The muscling helps hide the scars somewhat, but it takes a little bit of time. This one had some wire on the main trunk, and you can still see a little bit of an indentation, but it's probably going to grow out because it wasn't too severe of a cut in the first place, or a gross scar in the first place. So just keep an eye on them. These have beautiful reddish buds, which can be used to help you select a pot that will properly highlight that aspect of the tree, either contrasting or complementary, right? So maybe you want the little red buds to stand out, or maybe you want it to fade in. Of course, a white pot will always help things pop, but they can be a little plain or a little overused. One of those trees that can accommodate a green pot. Often it's like, oh, well, green foliage on green pot. I don't really love green pots. Okay, I get that. But think about it in the winter silhouette, right? When you get these bright red buds, they're just, here, maybe I can pull a little closer. All right, you've got these red buds that are popping. Then you want to make sure that you get the right tree combination with that pot. I'm just going to cut a little notch in here. Then I cut a vertical notch for the angle. So when it's flat, it's an angled cut. But when I prop it up to the right angle, it'll be vertical. So we're good. Some people put stakes in or whatnot, but those can always get moved or bumped, especially with me with the 4 kids running around. I just cut the pot. Pardon me. Maybe cut that one back, but we're not in a rush. So let's see if we can get this branch all the way from facing backwards here. We're going to try and pull it right into this area. Remember, always be twisting to make sure that you stretch those tissues out rather than just bend them. make those acute angles, move in and then back out to fan out those pads. Remember, the buds on the end don't necessarily have to stay your terminal bud. So I'm going to bend this back actually. So this longer bud right here, this longer branch, will continue to elongate on that side. Counter to this one. To come up a little bit more. And these, as they grow out, right now they're kind of on the same plane. Right? We'll adjust that. Let these elongate down lower. Keep those cut back to not have the same length on the silhouette from side to side. But fairly quick and painless. We've got a nice broad base on the tree. Start to see that interesting root flare. Angle it a tad that way. Counterbalance the tree here, that growth. This large branch up top, we may cut back further a bit, but we'll see how that goes. Let this canopy develop. The canopy may end up being here, but there's no need right now to cut this back. So we already cut it back quite a bit. Another option, if we really want some taper, is to have this branch here. It's growing right off the front. We could wire that directly up vertical, cut this down here. That would be a longer project to develop that. This as the main trunk. But I think this tree has good enough style and texture that it would work out in the short term as far as that goes. So pull this other one up as an example here. Let's see what we've got. It's a nice tree. Probably change the angle forward just a bit on this one as well. But a nice tall green hornbeam here. It really looks scrawny in this. So let's change that angle till it fattens up a little bit. All right. But the tall elegance isn't a bad thing on here, right? Just depends on what you're looking for. A little scarring under here, but nothing crazy. That's not wire scars. That's a little bit of dieback, but it's healed up really nicely. It's an interesting feature. This is an example right here of letting a branch grow up and really take off with that energy sacrifice branch. Maybe it develops as the apex. Maybe we cut it back here so it doesn't take so much strength, right? And thicken up because we don't want it to be the same thickness as down here. So the taper here it's fine from here where it switches direction. There's taper, but this section doesn't. So it's pretty much, there's no transition of taper in this whole central midsection. It's about the same length as this section down here. Even though there's movement in here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we get up here and this is all the same too. It's a little bit thinner, but almost negligible. Do we come back somewhere to like this branch and prune it way back? Then we have long taper and it gets shorter. Nice short one, another short one. And then we prune that down eventually, and that takes over as a transition of taper on that tree. Really, really good branching development here. Would it look good from the other side? That's the next question. All right, it looks like the wiring has been done over this direction. You can always change that though. Do you cut back to something like this right here? A little nub. The nub's a little higher, which would mean it would have some back branching. So maybe we take it back to the nub first. See how that looks. But I really like the idea of bringing that down. Not so short as the other one, but definitely need to get it a little bit shorter. Just grab a bit of saw here. I think we're going to take it down to that one. I like it. So we just need to I'm going to come in and make a cut on the opposite side just so it doesn't tear through. And then finish up the cut from this way, this direction. Try not to rip the buds on the other side off here. With the end of that saw. There it goes. There we go. Fairly large chunk coming down off that thing. Definitely want to get cut paste on that as soon as possible. It's a big, heavy cut, but much better transition of taper and another angle of movement in there. Maybe this whole thing stays, maybe not. Probably pull it down a little bit, but we'll let that. We're not in a rush as far as that goes. But if we're here, we may as well. I like this. This is a lot of branching on it here. Bifurcation. Maybe we'll prune it back to that one. Continue that up, vertical. Keep going to the right slowly but surely kind of thing. And eventually pull this apex back. This direction, perhaps. We'll see how that develops, though. What we'll want to do is actually pull this down and let this take over as a vertical branch. So this will be a branch going over this direction. We'll develop as the new leader. That's what we'll do. A little bit thicker of wire. knife away. Oh, there's my other knife. There's one sitting out there the whole time. Of course there was. So it always goes. So, got that there. I'm just going to pull this down and create the apex by making the former apical branch into a branch itself. A seat kept falling down. Huh. That's funny. So now what's going to happen is, where are we? Here we go. This former apical branch is now going to form a branch much like these here, any other secondary branch or primary branch. And this is going to become the new leader off the top there. And it will in turn develop other branching to wire out as the canopy. The canopy of the tree will be somewhere up in here and transition that taper from thick to a little thinner, 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 and let that go. The end will probably be right about here as we influence the change of directions and really let the tree come into its own. But this one could go into a pot as well and let that slowly form, or we keep it in this nursery container and intentionally fertilize it extra to make sure that we get the growth that we want out of the top as we manage everything else on the tree and let it develop into kind of its own thing. But it's a nice tree, good structure, interesting branch movement. It's a good one. This needs a little thicker wire to be pulled down here, however. So let's put that on now. Or maybe not a thicker wire, but an additional wire. Here we go. If we double up, it should do the trick. We'll see how it goes. Trying not to break off any buds. There may be some casualties, but keep that to a minimum. As you navigate your way through the leafless tree. This is why we wire deciduous in the winter though versus in the summertime. Partly. That was just the right amount. Good. Bring that a little more towards the front. Wire that out, down. Flatten out that pad. There we go. Much nicer. Okay. Is if we're wiring in the summer, we're ripping off all this foliage. If we come in now, there's only buds to remove, incidentally. But it's also the best time to prune these back. So we come in, we prune, we wire, we mess with the deciduous at one time. Also, they're growing a lot in the spring and the summer. So why come in and wire something or prune something and have it grow back out? Wire. There's different ways to manage the strength of the tree and the energy of the tree in the spring, summer. That's when you get into full and partial defoliation. I usually only partially defoliate, never full. But anyway, so you mess with the trees at the most optimum time when you can also do the most multiple techniques. So even pulling this tree in one extra time into the workshop takes that much more time versus doing two of these things at once. I'm just taking off these little growth nubs. They'll heal up just fine. Put some hormone on them. Let it do its thing. Or not hormone. Put some paste on them. Let them heal up. All right. Got one more tree. I'm gonna work on one more Korean hornbeam. Scrawny little thing, but it's useful, powerful, nice little tree. And I mean, when I say scrawny, I mean it's tiny, like a pinky thickness. But its own kind of thing. So we have the potential. We know this has been pruned back and it's died back appropriately. So there we go there. We'll seal that up. It's died back way back there, which can be a tough thing about hornbeam, dying back through the middle. Oh, we've got this really interesting movement and a knot and some missing spaces. And we're going to come back and say, well, where exactly do we want this tree? We've got branch here, potential. Maybe we swing it around and it develops into a double trunk, right? Maybe we have a double trunk tree. It's kind of somewhat of a horseshoe. So maybe this is the trunk, but we don't want all the energy going into there. So I'm at least going to come back and cut to here. Maybe we transition it here, right to that guy. We'll leave two nubs on there because we do want branching. We don't just want to ever cut back and leave it and say, oh, great. It is rather thick, though. You know what? It'll develop its own branches. I was going to say, rarely do we want to come back and just cut off the whole branch immediately after thinking about, well, where do I want some branches in the future? Do I need a thicker branch? Something like that. So we'll come back. We leave a little bit of a stub there. Wire, but this is a more long-term tree that we're just going to let grow and pump with fertilizer. Let this grow out into a main branch. And so if this is going to be a branch, you can see the thickness on this. If this is going to be a branch, which is closer to index finger thickness. This is half a pinky, right? We need this to thicken up. But as it thickens and grows, we also want to pull back so we don't make those huge major cuts that are going to cause dieback on the tree, right? We get dieback on the trunk, and then we have other issues to deal with. So it may slow it down a tad as far as the hormones and the tip go, but what we miss out with that will make up for in during the growing season, really pumping this thing full. One thing you can do is you wait till it leaves out, and then during the defoliation, you select that leader. Or later in the fall, you can prune it back when it can heal up a little bit better and it's still adding vascular tissue. And then it'll allocate those hormones where it is. But for the sake of showing y'all kind of a transition of taper process on the tree, that's what we're looking at. But there's really interesting movement here, some good scarring and holes, and there'll be an opportunity to develop really interesting branching on a really funky tree. And if we want this to become the leader, we can just wire it up. And now, since it's taller than what we just cut back to, this will get the dominant amount of energy and transition that taper out a little bit better on that branching. But just a one cut. There's no need to wire these now. I could, but we're going to let the tree do its thing and try a clip and grow method on this one since it hasn't been wired. So be a good tree to play with and see how it develops as the future goes on. All right. Hornbeams are great. They're rather flexible. They grow vigorously. They have a great leaf shape, unique bark, just an all-around classic bonsai tree. Thanks for tuning in. We'll hopefully see y'all next week. Bonsai on, y'all.